The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Elena Reyes's studio apartment on the east side of Chicago, casting pale gold ribbons across the worn linoleum floor. At 28, Elena had learned to find beauty in small things. The way steam curled from her coffee mug, the soft sound of her daughter's breathing, the brief, merciful silence before the day demanded everything she had left to give. She stood at the kitchenette sink, washing a single bowl, a single spoon, the modest evidence of a life pared down to its absolute essentials. Her dark hair was already pulled back into the neat, low bun she wore for work, and her uniform, a crisp white blouse and black slacks, was pressed and hanging on the back of the door. She had ironed it the night before, the way she did every night, because the one thing Elena Reyes refused to surrender was her dignity. From the corner of the small room came a sound that instantly softened every line of her face. A rustling, a small grunt, and then the unmistakable patter of tiny bare feet on the floor. Lily, 3 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a summer breeze. She appeared from behind the curtain that divided their sleeping area from the rest of the apartment, dragging a threadbare stuffed rabbit by one worn ear, her curly hair a magnificent, glorious disaster. "Mama," Lily announced, as though this were news of tremendous importance. "Good morning, my love." Elena crouched down immediately, scooping her daughter into her arms and pressing her lips against those warm, sleep-soft cheeks. "Did you sleep well?" Lily held up the rabbit with great solemnity. "Bun Bun had a bad dream." "Oh no." "Well, you tell Bun Bun that bad dreams can't follow us into the daytime." Elena kissed the rabbit's matted ear for good measure, and Lily's face split into a grin so wide it seemed it might outgrow her tiny face entirely. They ate breakfast together. Oatmeal with a spoonful of peanut butter stirred through it, because Lily had declared last Tuesday that peanut butter made everything taste like a birthday cake, and Elena had chosen to believe her. The two of them sat at the small table by the window, and Elena watched her daughter eat with that particular, ferocious love that only mothers understand, a love so large and so helpless that it sometimes felt like grief. Today was Thursday. In 4 days, on Sunday, Lily would turn 3. Or rather, Lily would be turning 3 for the second time, because she had already been informed by her daughter approximately 47 times over the past 2 weeks that her birthday was coming, that she would be this many, 3 fingers splayed wide, and that she wanted, more than anything else in the entire world, a Barbie doll. Not just any Barbie, the Barbie. Elena knew the exact one. It sat in the front window of the toy store 2 blocks from Lily's daycare, a princess Barbie with a pink gown that shimmered like real silk, long blonde hair that could be braided, and a tiny silver crown that caught the light and scattered it in tiny diamonds across the ceiling when you tilted it just right. Lily had pressed her small nose against that toy store glass 3 times now, and each time she had turned to her mother with eyes full of absolute, uncomplicated faith. "You'll get it for me, Mama. You always make things right." Elena had smiled and nodded and said, "We'll see, baby," while quietly calculating in her head. The doll cost $42. After rent, after the electric bill that had arrived 3 days late and $20 higher than expected, after daycare, after groceries, after the $6 copay for Lily's last ear infection, Elena had $31 in her checking account and 11 days until her next paycheck. $11 short of magic. She had lain awake for 3 nights turning the numbers over, hunting for some hidden pocket of money she might have overlooked. There wasn't one. She had already sold the small gold earrings her mother had given her when Lily was born. She had already canceled her phone's data plan and switched to Wi-Fi only. She had already cut her own grocery list down to rice, beans, eggs, peanut butter, and whatever produce was marked down to nearly nothing at the corner store. There was nothing left to cut. That morning, while Lily was distracted with Bun Bun, Elena had knelt beside her daughter and taken both her small hands. She had meant to say it gently, to soften it, to frame it in hope and love and all the other things she was certain she was giving her daughter in abundance. But when Lily looked up at her with those enormous, trusting eyes, the words came out in the only honest shape they had. "I can't afford a Barbie doll for your birthday," she whispered. Her voice was steady, but just barely. Lily stared at her for a long moment, her small brow furrowing in the particular way it did when she was processing something that didn't quite fit her world yet. Then she looked down at Bun Bun, then back at her mother, and said with the absolute, devastating simplicity of a 3-year-old, "That's okay, Mama. I still love you the most." Elena had excused herself to the bathroom and stood over the sink for 2 full minutes, pressing a cold washcloth to her face, pulling herself back together the way she did every single time life handed her something she couldn't fix. Then she straightened up, looked at herself in the cracked mirror above the faucet, and said out loud to her reflection, "You are enough. You are enough for her. You are enough." She said it until she believed it. Then she got Lily dressed, walked her to daycare, and took the 40-minute bus ride to the Hartwell estate on the north shore of the city, where she had worked as a housekeeper for the past 14 months. The Hartwell estate was a world so removed from Elena's own that sometimes, in the first few seconds after she stepped through the iron gate, she felt genuinely disoriented, as though she had crossed not just a street, but an entire dimension. The grounds alone were larger than her entire neighborhood block. The house, a sweeping contemporary structure of glass and pale stone overlooking Lake Michigan, contained 11 bedrooms, a home theater, a library with a rolling ladder on a brass rail, and a kitchen with appliances that cost more individually than Elena's rent for an entire year. And somewhere inside that house, the man who owned all of it was already awake. She could always tell. The smell of dark roast coffee drifting from the kitchen. The faint, purposeful sound of footsteps on the upper level. The particular quality of silence that surrounded a man who was thinking very hard about very large things. Nathan Hartwell, 33 years old. Self-made billionaire, founder of 3 technology companies, the youngest person ever to appear on the cover of Forbes magazine 3 consecutive times. Quiet. Intense. Impossible to read, and Elena had come to believe, profoundly, quietly, and carefully alone. She let herself in through the staff entrance, put on her apron, and got to work, carrying with her, tucked invisibly against her heart like a stone, she had stopped noticing the weight of the whispered words she had given her daughter that morning. "I can't afford a Barbie doll for your birthday." She didn't know that someone had heard her. Nathan Hartwell had not intended to overhear anything. He had been awake since 4:30 that morning, which was not unusual. Sleep, for Nathan, had always been something of a negotiation. He could achieve it when he submitted to it completely, allowed his mind to go still, which happened perhaps 4 nights out of 7. On the other 3, he lay in the dark of his enormous bedroom and watched the ceiling and thought about the things he could not stop thinking about, which were many and varied, and none of them particularly restful. That morning he had given up on sleep entirely at 4:29, made himself coffee in the kitchen, a ritual he performed himself always, refusing to have anyone do it for him on the grounds that a man who couldn't make his own coffee had ceded too much of himself to comfort, and carried the mug out to the lower terrace, which overlooked the East Garden and beyond it, the pewter shimmer of Lake Michigan in the pre-dawn dark. He had been standing there for nearly 2 hours when he heard the staff entrance open. He knew, without looking, that it was Elena. He had learned, over 14 months, to identify each of his 3 household staff members by the particular sounds of their arrival. Mrs. Patterson, his housekeeper supervisor, arrived at 8 sharp and made the sound of determined efficiency, keys, clipboard, decisive footsteps. Jorge, who handled the grounds, arrived in silence and disappeared into it. Elena arrived at 7:15 and moved through the house the way water moves through a careful space, quietly, gracefully, disturbing as little as possible. He had noticed Elena Reyes in the way that a quietly observant person notices everything, which is to say thoroughly, and without particularly meaning to. He noticed that she was always early. He noticed that she was meticulous, not merely competent, but genuinely careful, the way someone is careful about things they respect. He noticed that she never touched his personal items unnecessarily, never lingered in rooms she had finished, never helped herself to the kitchen beyond what was offered. He noticed the small photograph she kept tucked into the front pocket of her apron, a little girl with wild curls and an enormous laugh, caught mid-giggle by whoever had taken the shot. He had noticed these things, filed them away, and done absolutely nothing with them because Nathan Hartwell had long ago accepted that noticing people and knowing what to do about them were entirely different skills, and he possessed the first in abundance and the second barely at all. That morning, he had come back inside through the terrace door just as Elena was coming through the hallway from the staff entrance with her supply caddy. Neither of them had expected the other. She had stopped short, startled, and for one unguarded second her face had been completely open, tired, sad, soft in a way of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were—" "It's fine," he said. "I was just heading upstairs." But he hadn't gone upstairs. He had turned instead toward the kitchen, refilled his coffee, and stood at the island with his laptop, the way he sometimes did when he couldn't make himself sit at his desk. He had been there, around the corner from the hallway, 10 minutes later, when he heard Elena's voice, low, tender, and cracked at the edges in the particular way voices crack when they're trying very hard to hold a shape that pain keeps pushing out of. She was on the phone. With the daycare, he realized after a moment she had called to leave a message about Sunday, about picking Lily up early on her birthday. And then, almost as an aside, almost as if she were speaking to herself rather than into the phone, she said it. Not dramatically, not as a complaint or a plea, just as a fact, quiet and honest and absolutely heartbreaking in its simplicity. I can't afford the Barbie doll she wants. I keep trying to figure it out, and there's nothing left. I'll make it special another way. I always do." A pause. Then, softer still, as if she'd almost forgotten she was on a call at all. "She deserves everything. She deserves everything." Nathan stood very still on the other side of the wall. He was not a sentimental man. He had grown up in circumstances that had burned sentiment out of him early. A father who left when Nathan was 7, a mother who worked 2 jobs and loved fiercely and died of exhaustion at 52, a childhood spent learning that the world was not interested in your feelings, only in your results. He had built his first company at 19 on 4 hours of sleep a night, and the bone-deep conviction that self-pity was a luxury he could not afford. He had made his first million at 24 and his first billion at 30 and had felt, at both milestones, mostly just a kind of grim, exhausted satisfaction, as though he had proven something to a room full of people who were no longer present. He was not, in short, a man who cried at things. But standing in his 11-bedroom glass house on the shore of Lake Michigan with his second cup of coffee cooling in his hand, listening to a 28-year-old woman try to figure out how to make $42 appear out of nothing for a little girl who deserved everything, Nathan Hartwell felt something move through him that he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not pity. He was careful to identify it correctly because pity was a condescending thing, and what he felt was nothing like that. It was recognition. He recognized the voice of someone who refused to be broken by things that should, by any reasonable measure, break a person. He recognized the particular dignity of someone doing the quiet, unglamorous, invisible work of holding a life together with bare hands. He recognized it because his mother had had that voice too, and he had spent 33 years and several $billion trying to honor what it had cost her. He set down his coffee cup. He opened his laptop. And he began to think. Not in the small, practical way that the situation might have called for. Not simply I should give her some money or I'll increase her salary, but in the large, architectural way that his mind worked when it was genuinely engaged, when a problem had presented itself, and he had decided, with the full weight of his attention, to solve it. He thought for a long time. Long enough that the light through the kitchen window shifted from pale gray to pale gold. Long enough that he heard Elena move from the hallway to the upper landing, the quiet efficiency of her work a kind of background music. By the time he heard her come back downstairs, Nathan Hartwell knew exactly what he was going to do. He just needed to wait for the right moment to do it. The day passed the way long, complicated days do, in fragments that felt both endless and insufficient. Elena moved through the Hartwell estate with her usual careful thoroughness, room by room, restoring order to spaces that barely needed it because a man living alone in 11 bedrooms generated very little mess. She dusted shelves of books that were clearly read and reread. She could tell by the broken spines, the occasional pencil mark in the margins, and felt the small, complicated admiration she always felt for Nathan Hartwell's library. He had the books of someone who was genuinely curious about the world, not someone trying to appear that way. History, philosophy, engineering, biography, the occasional battered paperback novel tucked sideways on a shelf. She had once, while dusting the third shelf from the bottom, found a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web with the name Nathan written inside the front cover in the large, unsteady letters of a child just learning to write. She had held it for a moment, then set it back exactly as she'd found it. Nathan Hartwell had once been a small boy who loved a story about a spider and a pig. She did not know why this made her feel less lonely, but it did. That Friday she was acutely aware of him in a way she usually managed to avoid. He was working from home, which he did 3 days a week, and she could feel the gravitational pull of his presence. A door opening, footsteps, the low sound of his voice on a conference call, clipped and certain, the voice of a man accustomed to being listened to. She made herself invisible the way she always did, stepping out of rooms as he entered them, timing her work to the rhythms of his movement. Once, in the library, she rounded a corner and nearly walked directly into him. He caught her by the elbow, just briefly, just enough to prevent the collision, and let go immediately. "Sorry," they both said at the same time. There was a beat of silence. Elena felt her face go warm and turned her attention with great focus to the supply caddy in her hands. "How's your daughter?" Nathan asked. Elena looked up. In 14 months, he had never asked her that. He acknowledged her presence, thanked her for her work, occasionally left notes about specific tasks, all of it courteous and professional and carefully bounded. He had never asked her anything personal. "She's wonderful," Elena said, because Lily was always wonderful. "Her birthday is Sunday." "How old will she be?" 3. Elena allowed herself a small smile. She'll be the first to tell you. Nathan nodded. Something moved through his expression that she couldn't name, something careful and deliberate, like a man choosing his next words with great precision. But he said only, "That's a good age," and walked back toward his office. Elena stood in the library for a moment, holding her caddy, feeling oddly unsettled in a way she couldn't explain. She shook it off. She had more important things to think about. Sunday was 2 days away. She had spent her lunch break the previous day looking up how to make a birthday cake from scratch because the box mixes she discovered while standing in the baking aisle were $4 more than she'd expected. She had found a recipe that used ingredients she already had. She had found a tutorial for making a paper crown because Lily loved crowns. She had found a free printable coloring sheet of a princess that she could run off at the library and frame in a dollar store frame. It wasn't a Barbie doll, but she was going to make Sunday feel like the most magical day in the history of 3-year-old birthdays, even if it took every creative cell in her body to do it. She had already called Lily's daycare friend Sophia's mom, who had agreed to bring Sophia over for an hour to make it feel like a party. She had bought 3 pink balloons, the cheap latex kind, not the mylar ones, and practiced blowing them up and tying them without letting Lily see. She had a plan. It was a good plan. She deserves everything, she had told herself, over and over. And everything is what you're going to give her, even if everything looks different than what she asked for. She was in the laundry room, folding linens with the practiced speed of someone who had done it 10,000 times, when Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway with an expression that Elena had never seen on the older woman's face before. It was somewhere between confusion and excitement and the kind of careful neutrality people wear when they know something important and aren't yet sure they're allowed to say it. "Mr. Hartwell would like to see you in the study," Mrs. Patterson said. "When you have a moment." Elena set down the sheet she was folding. Her heart did a small, involuntary thing. In 14 months, she had never been summoned to the study. "Of course," she said, smoothing her apron. "Right now." "Right now," Mrs. Patterson confirmed, and then added, very quietly, "Don't look frightened, dear. I don't think it's bad." Elena walked down the long hallway to the study, aware with every step of the distance between her world and this one, the polished hardwood floors, the original artwork on the walls, the absolute quiet of a space insulated from every hardship she knew. She knocked on the half-open door. "Come in," Nathan said. She pushed the door open, and what she saw on his desk made her stop walking entirely. She stopped in the doorway because her brain needed a moment to catch up with her eyes. On Nathan Hartwell's enormous mahogany desk, arranged with what she would later realize was deliberate, thoughtful care, was a collection of items that made no sense to her for exactly 3 seconds, and then, with a rush that hit her like warm water, made all the sense in the world. There was the Barbie. Not just the Princess Barbie from the toy store window. That one was there too, in its pink and silver box, the tiny crown glittering, but beside it a second Barbie and a third. A Barbie with brown skin and dark curly hair just like Lily's, dressed in a scientist's lab coat, holding a miniature microscope. A Barbie in a deep purple ball gown with a wheelchair beside her. A Barbie dressed as an astronaut, her helmet tucked under one arm. Beside the dolls, a birthday card, sealed, with Lily written on the envelope in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. Beside the card, a gift bag stuffed with pink tissue paper, and peeking out from the top, a child's art set, the good kind, with real colored pencils and watercolors and a fat pad of blank paper. And beside all of that, something that made Elena's throat close completely, a small, handwritten note, folded in half, with her name on it. She didn't move. She wasn't sure she was breathing. Nathan was standing behind the desk. He had his hands in his pockets, and his expression was the same expression she had seen him wear when he was delivering a presentation, careful, controlled, prepared for any response. As though he had rehearsed for this. As though he was nervous. "Sit down, please," he said. She sat. Mostly because her legs had made the decision for her. "I owe you an apology first," Nathan said, and his voice was different from his usual voice, quieter, stripped of its professional polish. "I overheard part of your phone call this morning. I wasn't trying to, but I did, and I want you to know that before anything else, because you deserve to know." Elena opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "You said she deserves everything," Nathan continued. "And I want you to know that I think you're right." He paused. "I also think you do too." The silence in the study was enormous. "I'm not doing this to make you feel pitied," he said carefully. "I want to be very clear about that. I've watched you work in this house for over a year, and I have a great deal of respect for you. This isn't charity. This is..." He stopped, looked at the window, looked back at her. "My mother worked 3 jobs for most of my childhood. She never once let me see her cry about money. She made every birthday feel like a miracle." His jaw tightened slightly. "I know what it costs to do that. I know what it actually costs." Elena felt the tears come before she could stop them. She pressed her lips together hard. "There's a card in that envelope for Lily," Nathan said, his voice carefully steady. "And I want you to look at the note with your name on it before you decide anything." With fingers that weren't quite steady, Elena reached across the desk and picked up the folded note. She opened it. It was short. 3 sentences. "Your daughter's daycare fees are paid for the next 12 months. Your salary has been adjusted, effective immediately, to reflect what your work is actually worth. And if she ever wants to visit and see the library, the invitation is open." Elena read it 3 times. She looked up. Nathan was watching her with that careful, braced expression, like a man who had done something he believed was right and was prepared to be told he'd gotten it wrong. "Why?" she whispered. Not ungratefully. Genuinely. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because good people shouldn't have to whisper apologies to their children for things that aren't their fault." His voice was very low. "And because I have more money than I will ever be able to spend, and I have spent most of my adult life being very careful about what I do with it, and today I'm choosing to do this with some of it." He paused. "If you'll let me." Elena looked down at the Barbie dolls. At the curly-haired scientist one. The one that looked like Lily. She felt a tear slide down her face and didn't try to stop it. "The one with the curly hair," she said softly. "You picked it because she has curly hair." Something crossed Nathan's face that she had never seen on it before. Something open and young and entirely unguarded. "I spent 45 minutes on the website," he said, "trying to find the right one. And for the first time in 14 months, in the magnificent, quiet study of the Hartwell estate, Elena Reyes laughed, a real laugh, surprised and full and completely uncontrolled, the kind of laugh that only arrives when something is broken through a wall you didn't even know was this close to crumbling." She pressed her hand over her mouth, but it was too late. Nathan Hartwell, who did not smile easily or often, smiled. Sunday arrived on the wings of a clear, cold October dawn. The sky over Chicago, that particular shade of deep blue that only exists in autumn, so saturated and perfect it looks painted. Elena was up at 6, which was early even for her. She had been awake since 5, lying in the dark beside her sleeping daughter with her hand resting lightly over Lily's curls, feeling the soft, rhythmic rise and fall of her breathing and thinking about nothing at all, which was unusual and wonderful. For the first time in longer than she could clearly remember, the first thoughts of her waking mind were not calculations. Not rent, not groceries, not copays, not the specific arithmetic of barely enough. They were just thoughts about this day. About Lily's face. About pink balloons and a paper crown and the magnificent collection of Barbies hidden in the closet behind Elena's winter coats, waiting. She got up quietly and padded to the kitchen in her socks. She had bought all the cake ingredients the day before, without hesitation, without standing in the aisle doing mental math, and for a few minutes she just stood at the counter, assembling them, feeling the still new and slightly bewildering sensation of having enough. 3 days had passed since the afternoon in Nathan's study. Elena had gone home that evening in a state of controlled emotional disarray, sat on her bathroom floor for 10 minutes processing everything, then stood up, washed her face, and spent the rest of the evening being extremely present with her daughter, because that was who she was. She dealt with big feelings privately and then returned to the business of living. She had told no one, not her sister in Milwaukee, not her friend Dara, who she spoke to every Sunday, not anyone. She wasn't sure yet how to hold what had happened in a way that could survive being put into words. It felt fragile, private, like something she needed to carry carefully until she understood the shape of it. What she understood was this. Nathan Hartwell had heard her. Not just the words, but the thing underneath the words, the exhaustion and the love and the fierce, stubborn refusal to let either one of those things beat the other. He had heard all of it, and he had responded not with pity, but with something that felt, in its deepest substance, like respect. She had stayed late on Friday to thank him properly, found him in the kitchen, making his own coffee, which he always did, and stood in the doorway and said, "I want you to know that what you did has changed things for us. Not just the money. The way you did it." He had looked at her over the rim of his mug. "You would have found a way," he said. "You always do. I just wanted to give you a little less to find." She had thought about that sentence all weekend. "You always do." He had been paying attention, not in a way that was intrusive or presumptuous, just in the quiet way of someone who saw the world carefully, who noticed what was actually there rather than what was convenient to see. The cake came together beautifully, a simple yellow cake with vanilla buttercream, pink-dyed, spread in imperfect, loving swirls. She had written Lily in purple gel icing, the letters slightly wobbly, which made them more perfect. 3 candles stood in a proud little row. She set it in the center of the table and stepped back to look at it, and felt a rush of joy so clean and uncomplicated that it nearly brought her to tears again. She would not cry today. Today was for joy only. Mama. The curtain exploded outward, and Lily appeared like a small, magnificent storm, hair untamed, bun in tow, wearing her favorite pajamas with the little stars on them. Her eyes went immediately and unerringly to the balloons tied to the back of the chair, 3 pink mylar ones, because Elena had allowed herself the upgrade, and her face went through approximately 4,000 emotions in 2 seconds. "Balloons," she breathed. "Happy birthday, my Lily love." Elena dropped to her knees, and Lily ran directly into her arms with full-body commitment, nearly knocking them both over. "I'm 3, Lily announced into her mother's neck, holding up 3 fingers. "You are 3, Elena confirmed solemnly. "The most official 3-year-old in the city of Chicago." Lily pulled back to study her mother's face, checking, the way she always did, to make sure the joy was real. It was. Lily, satisfied, spotted the cake. What followed was the most uncomplicated, luminous hour Elena could remember in recent years. Lily ate a piece of cake for breakfast, which Elena allowed on the grounds that it was a birthday and some rules exist specifically to be gently broken on sacred occasions. Sophia arrived with her mother at 10, and the two little girls immediately disappeared into a world of their own devising that involved significant amounts of imaginative drama. Elena and Sophia's mother, Marisol, sat at the kitchen table with coffee and talked in the comfortable, honest way of two women who understood each other's lives without needing to explain them. And then, at 11 o'clock, Elena said, "Lily, come here, love. I have something for you." She brought out the gift bag. Lily approached it with the reverence of someone who has been told their entire life that good things exist and has chosen, despite all evidence to the contrary, to believe it. She reached into the pink tissue paper with both hands. The first thing she pulled out was the curly-haired Barbie in the lab coat. Lily stared at it. Her lips parted. "She has curly hair," Lily whispered. "Like me." "Like you," Elena confirmed. Lily held the doll up and looked at it for a long, silent moment that Elena would keep inside her heart for the rest of her life. Then Lily looked at her mother, and her eyes were so full of something so big and so real that even 3-year-old eyes weren't quite enough to contain it. "Mama," she said with great certainty, "she's the most beautiful." And then she reached back into the bag and found the Princess Barbie and the Astronaut Barbie and the art set, and the room filled with the particular magnificent noise of a child who has been given more than they expected and is absolutely, completely, entirely undone by it, in the best possible way. Sophia's mouth had dropped open. "You have 3 Barbies," she said, in a tone usually reserved for miracles. 3, Lily confirmed, holding them up like a trophy. "Because I'm 3. Elena pressed her fingers to her lips. Across the room, Marisol caught her eye and raised an eyebrow. "Where did those come from?" Elena shook her head slightly. "Later." Marisol nodded. Later was always good enough between mothers. 3 weeks later, Elena was dusting the library shelves on a Tuesday afternoon, the quiet kind of Tuesday that felt like the world was resting, when she found a new book on the second shelf. It had not been there the previous week. She knew because she had dusted that shelf. It was a slim, cream-colored hardcover with no image on the cover, just a title in gold letters, "What Children Need Most." And slipped inside the front cover, visible because the book had been placed face out rather than spine out in the deliberate way of someone who wanted it to be found, was a piece of paper. She opened the cover. The note said, "Thought you might find this interesting. The chapter on page 34 made me think about something you said. NH." Elena stood in the library for a moment, holding the book. Then she sat down in the leather chair by the window, something she had never once done in 14 months, always remaining carefully on the right side of an invisible line, and she opened to page 34. The chapter was titled, "The Greatest Gift, Being Truly Seen." She read 2 pages before she heard footsteps in the hall, and she stood quickly, smoothing her apron, reaching for her caddy with the automatic reflex of someone accustomed to being somewhere she wasn't sure she was allowed to be. Nathan appeared in the doorway, saw her standing by the chair, saw the book in her hands. He stopped. She started. "Sit back down," he said. Not harshly. The way you say something when you mean it simply. She sat. He crossed the library and sat in the chair on the other side of the small table. The way, she thought, 2 people sit when they have decided, not quite consciously, not all at once, but undeniably, to close some of the distance between them. "Did you read it?" he asked. "Just started." She looked at the page. The part about being seen. Nathan nodded. He was quiet for a moment in the particular way he was quiet, not uncomfortably, not filling the silence with noise for politeness' sake, but genuinely sitting in it, turning something over in his mind. My mother used to say, he said finally, that the loneliest thing in the world isn't being alone. It's doing something hard and beautiful and having nobody notice. He paused. I noticed. I just wanted you to know that. Elena looked at him. This man who lived in 11 bedrooms and made his own coffee and kept a childhood copy of Charlotte's Web with his name written in crooked letters inside the front cover. This man who had spent 45 minutes on a website choosing the right Barbie because he wanted to find the one that looked like a little girl he had never met. This man who, she was beginning to understand, was not cold at all, only careful. Only careful in the particular way of people who have been hurt by carelessness and have decided, very deliberately, to be the opposite of that. I notice things too, she said quietly. Something shifted between them. Not dramatically, no music swelled, no thunderbolt arrived. Just a shift, the way light shifts when a cloud passes, the way a room feels different when a window is opened. Something that had been closed, opening. I know, Nathan said. They sat in the library for another 20 minutes. Elena read. Nathan worked on his laptop. Neither of them spoke much, and neither of them needed to, because some kinds of closeness don't require words to be real. In the weeks that followed, things changed in small, unmistakable ways. Nathan began leaving the library door open on the days Elena worked. Elena stopped being careful about which room she stood in and started just standing wherever her work took her. They talked about books, about Lily, about his mother and her mother, and the particular strange humor of having grown up with very little in a world that acted as though abundance was simply the natural state of things. He told her about the company he'd almost lost at 26, the months of sleeping in his office, the investors who pulled out, the single engineer who stayed because he believed in it. She told him about the 2 years she had spent raising Lily alone after Lily's father left, how she had learned in that time that she was stronger than she had previously given herself credit for, and that this knowledge, hard-won as it was, had turned out to be worth the price. He listened the way rare people listen, entirely, without waiting for his turn to speak. 6 weeks after Lily's birthday, Nathan called Elena into the study again. She wasn't afraid this time. She sat in the chair across from him and folded her hands in her lap and waited. He told her about a new foundation he was establishing, focused on childcare access and economic support for single-parent households in Chicago. He needed someone to help run the community outreach program, someone who understood what that life actually looked like from the inside. Someone whose judgment he trusted. It would mean leaving her housekeeping role he had already asked Mrs. Patterson to cover, and taking on a position that paid 3 times her current salary, with full benefits and flexible hours built in specifically for parents. I thought of you first, he said. Not because of what I know about your finances, but because of what I know about you. He held her gaze. You don't need to decide today. Elena decided in approximately 4 seconds. But she made herself count to 10 before she answered, because she was a woman of dignity and she intended to remain one. Yes, she said. I'll do it. Nathan nodded, and the relief on his face was so swift and genuine and completely unguarded that Elena filed it away beside the smile from that afternoon in the study, beside the 45 minutes on the Barbie website, beside You Always Do, beside I Noticed, all the small, accumulated evidence of a man who was beneath the glass and the steel and the Forbes covers, exactly the kind of person that mattered. That Sunday, Elena brought Lily to the estate for the promised library visit. Lily arrived with Bun Bun and all 3 Barbies and an immediate, absolute conviction that the rolling ladder on the brass rail was the greatest invention in human history. Nathan lifted her up so she could reach the handle and held her steady while she pushed herself along the shelves, and Lily laughed, that wind chime laugh that filled every corner of every room, and the sound of it moved through the quiet, enormous library like something the house had been waiting a long time to hear. Elena stood in the doorway and watched the 33-year-old man with the serious face and the careful hands and the childhood copy of Charlotte's Web hold her daughter safe on a rolling ladder, and she felt, with absolute clarity, with no qualification, with the deep and uncomplicated certainty of a woman who had survived enough to recognize a true thing when she finally found it, that some stories begin in whispers and end in joy. Not because the world is fair. It isn't always. But because sometimes, in the spaces between impossible and enough, something quietly, irrevocably, beautifully grows. And that, more than any doll, more than any salary, more than any rolling ladder in a magnificent library, is what Lily would carry with her all the rest of her life. The memory of a Sunday morning when her mother's whispered worry became something golden because someone heard it and chose to answer with kindness. 3 years old, and already she had learned the most important thing. She was seen. She was loved. She was enough. And so was her mother. The end.